Hugo's statue towered over the chaos, its imposing presence a silent witness to the unfolding battle. The humans who wore colored glasses, ill-suited to their true nature, navigated their lives in ignorance. Vikir clenched his fist, the aura emanating from the Beelzebub sword solidifying into a palpable force. Those who had removed their glasses could perceive realities invisible to ordinary humans, realities they could sever with ease. These individuals, who had ascended to supremacy, were known as swordmasters. Vikir's eyes burned with hatred as he moved with lethal precision. Before Ser could react, his blade carved a deep gash across her, its edge unerring. Gradually, the demonic aura surrounding Kamu's body dissipated, freeing her from its grip and allowing her to reclaim control. The remnants of the demon's essence crumbled into ash, Ser's eyes widening in disbelief. She had failed. Her gaze locked onto Vikir, rage igniting in her expression. She had been tasked with opening the gate, and now that mission lay in ruins. Within moments, her form disintegrated, her existence reduced to nothing more than drifting embers. Vikir, his body battered and bloodied from the battle, his arm lost in the clash, turned his gaze upward to the crimson sky. Smoke curled from the stump of his shoulder as he slowly recovered. He felt out of place, as though he was wearing outdated clothes. His strength, sight, and decision-making had far transcended mortal limits, surpassing even the boundaries of transcendence itself. The weight of his evolution settled upon him, undeniable and absolute. Which were the traits he couldn't feel with the mana that the Saintess brought out of him before? A flicker of worry lit up Vikir's eyes as he turned around, worried about Kamu's condition. Behind him, Kamu lay motionless on the fractured earth. He took slow, deliberate steps toward her, hoping, aching, to feel the warmth of their reunion, to share in that long-awaited emotion. But as he neared her, something happened. Vikir collapsed beside Kamu, their bodies lying still at the heart of the ruined battlefield. In the center of the crater, the divine immortal's ring began to glow, a quiet, pulsing purple light that intensified with each breathless moment. It stirred as though awakened by their silence, its magic finally unleashed now that the enemy had fallen. The glow surged upward in a beam of radiant light, tearing through the crimson sky above. As it struck the heavens, the barrier born of the ring's power slowly began to dissolve, fragmenting like shattered glass, fading into stardust. Unconscious, Vikir and Kamu remained unaware as the ground beneath them shimmered, unraveling into light. The spell activated, teleporting them away from the tower's final floor and back into the realm of the living. Hours passed. Still, Vikir did not move, but from the folds of his tattered clothes, the baby madam emerged. With careful, delicate steps, it climbed onto his arm, pausing to study his face. Baby madam bounced gently on Vikir's chest, trying with all her might to stir him awake. But Vikir didn't move. As she began to tire, she settled down beside him with a quiet sigh. Then the faint sound of footsteps brushing against the grass caught her attention. Someone was approaching, graceful, deliberate steps. A figure in a skirt emerged under the pale light of the moon, drawing closer. It was Rose. She stood silently a few paces away, her expression unreadable, her eyes reflecting the moonlight as they locked onto Vikir. Her gaze bore into him, deep and unblinking. She seemed lost in thought, caught in an internal conflict as she watched him lie motionless. Sensing something was wrong, baby madam shot to her feet and released a tiny but defiant hiss. Her stance fierce and protective, she planted herself in front of Vikir, refusing to let harm come to him. But Rose didn't raise a hand in violence. Instead, after a long pause, she stepped forward and gently reached down, not to Vikir, but to Kamu. Carefully, she slid Kamu's limp arm over her shoulder and, with effort, lifted the unconscious girl into her arms. The spider blinked in confusion over Rose's kind act. Then, just as she turned to leave while carrying Kamu away, a faint rustle broke the silence. Behind her, Vikir finally moved. With a trembling hand, he pushed against the ground. His body shook from exhaustion, blood still seeping from his wounds, but he forced himself up. Pressing a hand to his injured arm. "Wait," he said. Hearing his voice, Rose's eyes widened in surprise and she came to a halt. Seeing that she was able to move freely, Vikir felt a quiet sense of relief. It meant that Kamu was safe. That alone was enough for him. Rose's expression shifted subtly, her eyes gleaming with curiosity as she turned to face him. In the distance, smoke began to rise from the shattered remains of the city. Vikir pressed a hand against the wound on his shoulder, his gaze lowering to the ground. It was a shame, he thought, that their reunion had to end like this. But for now, the most important thing was for them to leave this place as quickly as possible. Sliding a hand into his pocket, Vikir drew out a small object and, with quiet resolve, tossed it toward her. He asked only that she give it to Kamu. Rose caught it effortlessly, her eyes widened in surprise. Vikir, still bleeding and battered, lifted his hand in parting. With a faint smile, he revealed the final message. If Kamu wished to see him again, she would have to follow where it led. Rose's attention lingered on the item in her hand, her expression shifting into quiet intrigue. Without a word, she turned her back on him. With Kamu still resting against her shoulder, she began walking away from the battlefield, leaving Vikir behind in the settling dust and moonlight. Baby Madam quietly climbed onto Vikir's shoulder, curling up against his neck as both of them watched in silence, eyes fixed on the distant figures of Rose and Kamu as they disappeared into the night. Back at the festival grounds, a sudden commotion rippled through the crowd. Someone was shouting, breathless and urgent, drawing attention from all directions. It was a man dressed in a flamboyant woman's costume, running at full speed through the gathering of students. His voice rang out over the noise as he delivered the news. The one who had attacked the academy was none other than the infamous Hound. The crowd froze. Murmurs turned into gasps, and students exchanged alarmed glances. One asked how severe the damage had been. The man, still panting, responded that, unexpectedly, there had been no casualties or destruction at all. Bianca, wearing a stitched-up Frankenstein costume, lowered her gaze to the ground, her expression shadowed with concern. Her thoughts drifted to the girl in the skull mask. She now suspected it had been the Black Mage. Her classmate, Tudor, in his gleaming Death Knight costume, rubbed his chin in thought, agreeing with the possibility. If the Black Mage had indeed fought the Hound, it explained her mysterious strength and presence on the battlefield. He admitted, albeit a bit sheepishly, that he hadn't dared to get involved in their fight. The situation had been too overwhelming. Piggy, wrapped in glittering fairy wings, looked visibly shaken. He was so scared that he thought that he was going to faint. Meanwhile, Sancho, clad in his warrior robe, turned aside with a hardened expression. His voice was calm but firm as he said that the Hound was, without a doubt, the most terrifying and violent person he had ever laid eyes on. While the group remained deep in conversation, Vikir, still dressed in his witch costume, quietly approached from behind. With a half-hearted chuckle, he admitted that he'd been so terrified during the attack he could barely breathe. The moment his voice broke through the air, every head turned. Eyes widened with surprise and immediate concern. Questions rushed in all at once. Where had he gone? Why hadn't he come back? And did he even realize how worried they had been? Vikir scratched the back of his head, clearly unsure how to explain himself. Dolores crossed her arms, her brows furrowed in a mix of frustration and relief. She spoke with quiet sternness, pointing out that no one had seen him at all while they were investigating the streets. She demanded to know where he had been. She knew him too well. Vikir wasn't the kind of person to abandon his friends or hide when things got dangerous. Sinclair, dressed in an elegant vampire costume, observed him quietly from behind. Vikir's eyes briefly flickered with unease, struggling to form a response until a sharp, teasing voice cut in from behind. A figure in a skirt stepped into view, calling Vikir a reckless fool for diving into danger alone. The triplets had arrived, all three dressed identically in maid uniforms, and all three were acting annoyed with Vikir's actions. One of them placed his hands on his hips, frustration etched into every movement. With an exaggerated sigh, he scolded Vikir, asking what they were supposed to do if he kept charging off by himself. Midbro, gripping his broom like a commander's sword, added his own warning, voice sharp as he ordered Vikir not to pull something like that again. Low Bro's eyes gleamed with an intense glare, his stare cutting through the air as he echoed the same warning. The three of them moved in unison, surrounding Vikir with synchronized scolding and clenched jaws. Watching this bizarre scene unfold, Sinclair closed her eyes with a soft, amused smile. She couldn't help but think that Vikir was unintentionally building his own gang. Meanwhile, Dolores gasped slightly, her eyes going wide in realization. Once again, it seemed she had completely misread the situation. Enough time passed before the first rays of sunlight stretched across the sky, bathing the world in a soft golden hue. With a quiet, uneasy gaze, Vikir looked upward, his eyes full of silent questions. He didn't know if she was safe, if she was truly okay. The sun continued its slow rise over the horizon, casting warmth across the city. Around him, everyone paused, taking in the beauty of the morning, but Vikir's thoughts remained distant. He would wait eagerly, quietly, until the day he could see Kamu again. Elsewhere, hidden in the ruins of an old, forgotten church at the edge of the city, a soft glow began to pulse from within. At the center of the decrepit sanctuary stood a faintly glowing sphere, ethereal and still. Beside it, silent and watchful, stood Rose. Moments later, ripples stirred the surface of the sphere, and from within emerged a figure dripping with residual energy. Kamu stepped forward, her body trembling, hair clinging to her damp skin. She placed a hand against the door of the sphere, pausing with a dazed, unreadable expression. Then, slowly, she stepped out into the light. Rose turned to face her, saying nothing. She simply watched as Kamu examined her hands with an almost mechanical motion. Kamu could sense that her body was erect because of Ser having gone berserk, and that they had forcibly broken the demon contract. Because of that final confrontation, she hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye or thank Vikir. She recalled how stupid it was for her to think that Vikir had actually died in the past. Still, Rose remained silent beside her, giving her space. But then her thoughts wandered to the way Vikir had looked at her, the way he had shielded her with everything he had, no matter how bloodied or broken he became. Her hands rose to her cheeks, heat blooming there as a blush crept across her face, believing that Vikir's actions meant that he treasures her a lot now. She remembered the exact moment she'd peeled away the demon's skin from her neck, the image of Vikir's smile clear as day. That memory alone made her heart stir with something fierce and soft all at once, because, in that moment, she'd realized just how much she meant to him. This time, she hadn't run away. She had fought beside him. Kamu closed her eyes, and a quiet smile curved her lips as the weight of that truth settled over her. They had made it through, not because they were invincible, but because neither of them had given up. Exhaustion clung to her like a second skin, dark circles beneath her eyes betraying how far she'd pushed herself. Tilting her head to the side, she let out a tired breath and murmured to the empty air, as if asking the world itself, wasn't Vikir the kind of man worth risking everything for? Floating beside her was the fractured remnant of the demon Ser, her form smaller now, weakened, ghost-like. Kamu turned her gaze toward her with a smug, almost mocking smile curling across her lips. Ser's ears twitched, her eyes brimming with tears. Her voice trembled as she questioned how Kamu could have defied their pact. To her, this was nothing short of betrayal, an impossible contradiction, a scam. Kamu's expression remained composed, her tone cool and distant, as she replied that she now had full control over her body. Whether Vikir had severed the contract or something deeper had unraveled it, she wasn't entirely sure. What mattered was that Ser no longer held the reins, and yet she still didn't die. Fury bloomed in Ser's tiny form as she clenched her fists, her trembling eyes glowing with venom. She revealed that breaking the 12-hour contract had come at a cost, a penalty that allowed her to live for a short while. Kamu locked her gaze on the demon, and a violet flame flickered to life in her palm. With a quiet whisper of magic, she summoned two small but potent barriers of force, compressing them around Ser's fragile body. A cruel satisfaction glinted in Kamu's eyes as she watched the magical barriers begin to crush Ser slowly. Her voice was calm, almost amused, as she stated that now, if she wished, she could squash and kill the demon using magic alone. Kamu was the alpha now. Ser writhed, her hands clawing at the invisible walls closing in around her. Her body shook with effort, her screams rising in pitch as pain overtook her, eyes overflowing with tears. She finally broke, sobbing and trembling as she begged Kamu to stop, to spare her. She swore she'd do anything, anything at all. Upon hearing the demon's plea, Kamu's eyes gleamed with wicked delight, and a slow, knowing smile curled across her lips. If Sayer wanted mercy, there would be a price. In exchange for sparing her life, Kamu demanded everything: the demon's power, her authorities, all remnants of their former bond. Their contract was broken, and now their roles were reversed. They were no longer equals. They were master and slave. Seeing Kamu this way, Sayer immediately thought of her as the actual devil. The little demon turned her back with a defeated sigh, her posture heavy with resignation. A flicker of sadness crossed her expression as she accepted her new reality. Kamu rested one hand on her hip, her tone suddenly lighter. She knew that without Sayer, she never would have met Vikir in the first place. Strange how even the darkest paths could lead to something bright. Sayer glanced over her shoulder and asked quietly what Kamu intended to do now. Kamu looked up at the sky, thoughtful, then answered, "It's time to open the gate." At those words, Sayer's eyes widened with a mix of awe and confusion, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. With a hint of hesitation, she asked if Kamu truly meant it. Kamu laughed softly, brushing hair from her face as she smiled. Of course not. Was Sayer insane enough to believe that? She was joking. With everything that had happened, she had no intention of repeating past mistakes. Rose stepped forward to help Kamu into her robe. Kamu explained that her first priority now was to return to the morgue estate. Her mind wandered, thoughts of Uncle Adolf, of her mother, of a future now possible because Vikir was still alive. There were broken pieces to mend, things she had destroyed that she now needed to set right. She lifted the robe's hood over her head, her eyes growing distant with sorrow. In her memory, Uncle Snake's face emerged, his tired smile before he had fallen. Her heart tightened. There was a duty she had to fulfill, to announce and mourn the passing of her master. Kamu clenched her fist. Her gaze softened with gratitude. From the depths of her heart, she thanked Snake. Because of him, she had been given a second chance, a chance to see Vikir again. Opening her hand, she revealed a golden coin resting in her palm. Her smile returned, gentler this time. If she joined the academy, she could become Vikir's junior. Rose and Sayer watched her silently, eyes filled with confusion, unsure of what was going through her mind. A breeze stirred the fallen leaves around them, carrying them into the sky like fragments of a new story beginning. Kamu's cheeks flushed a delicate pink, her eyes warm and brimming with affection. She made a quiet, fierce vow. When they met again, Vikir would be hers.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.